So tonight's show is sponsored by Rebecca Rami and member of her uncle Eliyahu ben Rahel. Yeah? Better? Top. We're going to talk tonight about the final chapter in Eliyahu Navi's lifetime, the Se'ara. So, I think it was today's chapter? Okay, so that's very good. So, everyone read today's chapter? Yeah, okay. So it should be on our minds. The chapter is has a lot of confusing elements to it, right? We have a lot of repetition in the chapter. The repetition of Eliyahu telling Elisha, stay here. Elisha goes, the Bnei Nevi'im then come and say, he's dying today. And then he says, Heshu. And then again, he sit here. Then the Bnei Nevi'im come again, and they say the same exact story. And then he says, I know, keep quiet. And then again he goes to the Yarden, sit here. No. And then the Bnei Nevi'im come and watch. They don't say anything at the third time. They come and they watch, and then they go to the Yarden, and they watch from far. And then we have the discussion between Elisha and Eliyahu. And that really ends the first half, when the Se'ara goes. And then we have this funny incidence of when Elisha leaves. You have pretty much 4 incidents as he comes back after the situation. The Bnei Nevi'im bow to him, and then they ask to go find Eliyahu. He says no. They say we're going anyway. He says go. Then the issue of the water, and then the issue of the Na'ari. So 4 issues. So really, you have, I would say, 4 episodes on the way, right? And 4 episodes on the way back, and it's almost broken up, almost equal amount of psukim, 12, and then 13, right? 12 psukim, the 12th pasuk is Avi, then 13 more psukim going on the way back. So it's an interesting structure to the Perek, right? And like I said, there's really a lot of questions, right? Why the repetition? Why the repetition? Why does Eliyahu not want Elisha to escort him? What is the story with the Bnei Nevi'im? Why does Elisha tell the Bnei Nevi'im to be quiet? Why do the Bnei Nevi'im keep saying, no, he's going to die? And why does Elisha want it to be quiet? We know he's going to die. Eliyahu knows he's going to die. Why does Eliyahu not tell Elisha I'm dying until Pasuk Tet? So it's a secret, but it's not a secret, right? And the whole strange request of Elisha, as the Mefarshim asks, who asks somebody to give me more than they have? That's difficult. So that whole request, Kiflaim, but Banel asks on that point as well. Nebuah is not in Eliyahu's hands to give. That's God's hands to give. So how is he asking it from Eliyahu? And so we have some questions to deal with, and which hopefully by the end we'll get to it. I think let's start by really Eliyahu is on his way to crossing the Yarden to die. So it's fine. He passes through Beit El and Yericho, which is a fine journey, but it seems to be, from the Lashon of the Psukim, that these are not just stops on the way, but destinies amongst themselves. And I'll tell you why. If we take a look, Eliyahu is coming down north through to Beit El, through to Yericho, to cross the Yarden, right? So, Vahi ba'alot Hashem et Eliyahu basar ha-shamayma b'yedech Eliyahu b'shel min ha-Gilgal. He's coming from Gilgal. Okay? Vayomer Eliyahu Elisha shev na ki Adonai shelachani ad Beit El. So Beit El's a journey. It tells a stop. It's not just on the way. It's a destination. And then, of course, Elisha swears he's not going to go. Then the Bnei Avim come. Then he says, God sent me to Yericho. So it's, again, Yericho seems to be a journey, not just a stop along the way. And then, of course, right, he says, I'm going to Yarden, through past the Yarden. So what are these journeys about? Why, and what's Eliyahu doing in Gilgal? Right? So let's start with that. What is Eliyahu doing in Gilgal? So what is unique about Gilgal? Gilgal, if we look in Perek Dalid, Pasuk Lamed Het, Gilgal seems to be a place that Elisha lives. Elisha shav ha-Gilgal avara ba'aretz u'bnei hanevim yoshvim lefanav. Right, and we'll probably next week maybe talk something about that nebuah. But that seems to be, so if Eliyahu is in Gilgal, he's there for a purpose of what? To probably see Elisha. It's Elisha's hometown. He's probably going to visit Elisha. Why would he be going to visit Elisha right now? Simple. Say goodbye. I'm leaving. I'm going to go to him and tell him I'm leaving now. So, and if that's correct, it's very possible that there are stops along the way where he would visit Bnei HaNevi'im, right? Visit the Bnei HaNevi'im, right? And therefore, he has this mission to go and depart from the Bnei HaNevi'im. So what does that mean? Why would he just go and just to say goodbye? Right? Would it be a nice guy and say goodbye? So I think Eliyahu, let's try and get into the mindset of Eliyahu Nevi right now. Eliyahu Nevi knows, and he knew for a while, that he will depart this world, and he will transfer his nibu'ah to somebody else named Elisha. Right? He was told that way back. Correct? And at that point, right, he wasn't just told that, he was told that for a reason. If we all remember the story, right, it's the kano kineti l'Hashem, right? And the excess amount of kin'ah has God tell him, listen, just appoint Elisha, it's time for you to go. And he does so. And in his mindset, when he does finally meet Elisha, if you remember, we have an incident there with the Aderet. What happened there? Right? He throws his cloak, and he sort of expects Elisha to do what? Follow him unquestioningly. That's not what Elisha does. What does Elisha do? Right. I want to go home. I want to kiss my parents. And there's that whole delayed episode where Elisha shows himself to be what? A very different figure than Eliyahu. Right? You imagine that's not what Eliyahu would have done if his master told him. He would have just disappeared and nobody knew where he'd been, and nobody cares. The Nebu'ah of God, Eliyahu, that's it. Navi Hashem, nothing matters. Elisha, a different person. Go back to Elisha, he's what we call more me'udavim abiriyot. Right away, we don't meet Eliyahu along with Elisha anymore. Now, that's not to assume that they didn't interact. We assume they did interact. But the text doesn't tell us about any interactive discussions between them. The next time we see them is in this chapter together. So there's an interesting connection there. And the Adid, it's going to come back. So we do see Eliyahu realizing very quickly that the person of Elisha is a different person. It's a different type of a Navi. And that incident from his putting him as his apprentice really shows the different styles between Eliyahu and Elisha. So Eliyahu knows something. When his heir, his spiritual heir, is a very different person with a very different mahalach. Eliyahu must assume that the time that he is going to leave this world, his mission is over. In fact, everything that he did is done. Someone else is taking over with a totally new approach. And when he goes to Elisha, he tells Elisha, listen, I'm just done. I'm leaving. You stay here. What does that mean? It means, look, I have to go my own way. Now you're going to do your thing. You're the next guy. You're going to take over. You're going to do it your way. It's a replacement. It's not a continuum. It's not a continuation. And therefore, you stay here. I will see you. I'm leaving. It's your turn now. Goodbye. And maybe that is the very essence of also what he would like to do to the Bnei HaNevi'im. In a sense, that's what seems to be happening. And in fact, the Bnei HaNevi'im probably read it the same way. Because they're telling him, oh, why don't they tell anything to Eliyahu? What do? They speak to Elisha and say, look at the Lashon. כי היום השם לוקח את אדונך מעל ראשך. Meaning, oh, you're free now. Your master, he's being taken off of your head. Right now, there's a new era. This is your time. This is your era to be the Nevi. To run it the way you want to run it. They understand there's a difference between Eliyahu and Elisha. And Elisha doesn't accept it. Elisha says, Heshu, keep quiet. It's not what happening here. So, the Bnei Nevi'im and Eliyahu understand things happening pretty much the same way. Eliyahu and Navi understands, my time is over, my mission is gone, I have no heir, I have no yoresh, my Talmid is going to do things differently, he's going to do it his way, I'm going, and I want to be alone and spend, that's it. It's between me and Borei Olam, I'm leaving, there's no place for anybody else here. And Eliyahu's sojourn to Elisha, to Gilgal, to take leave of him, and his sojourn as well throughout the stops that he makes, to take leave of the Bnei Nevi'im, meaning for good. His death is where? His death is in an interesting place. Where does he go to depart from this world? So he goes, of course, he says, I'm going to the Yarden, and he says, right, so he goes, and they pass over the Yarden, and that's where they meet. So where is Eliyahu when he wants to die? Where do you think he is? That's very interesting. Sojourn, Gilgal. These places should all sound familiar. Gilgal, Bet El, Yericho, splitting the Yarden and crossing. Where does that leave him? Splitting the Yarden leaves you probably in Arbot Moav. It leaves you very close to Har Nevo, right? And he's going to go up to Shamayim, and no one will be able to find his burial, right? That's what's going to happen here. That's a very familiar scene. He's reversing the trend. He's reversing the journey outside, right? His last stop before crossing the Yarden is where? Yericho. And he crosses the Yarden, he splits the Yarden, he winds up in Arbot Moav, and goes up to Shamayim, and nobody knows where he's buried. Only two individuals, nobody knows where they're buried. Right? That's going to be Moshe and Eliyahu. Nobody else knows. Those are the only two people where we don't know where they're buried. He's almost retracing the steps outside. He's going the other way. So, there is a connection. Why retrace the steps outside? Right? Why go backwards? Of course, it could symbolize his disconnect to the people on some level. He departs. He goes back to the place of Moshe Rabbeinu. And also, in a sense, both Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliyahu leave no trace of themselves. So in one sense, it could be a final depart. There's no kever to pray at. There's no place to meet. They formally and finally depart this world with no trace of themselves left to Am Yisrael at all. Right? But let's think for a minute. Is that really true? Ironically, no more. See you. Am Yisrael. I'm the one who really has no trace. I have no kever. You'll never be able to pray. It's the disconnect and the depart is total. Or the opposite. Maybe not. Maybe Eliyahu is the one who's the most connected. Right? It's interesting, by Moshe Rabbeinu we also have that Moshe Rabbeinu is the idea, his death is not really death. If you remember Harambam in the Moreh Nevuchim talks about mitah by Moshe Rabbeinu as something that just we call mitah. But it was just the next step of his most elite, perfected neshama just exiting out of the body. And Eliyahu seems to have some similar deportation. So maybe, and we'll just think about this, maybe what we think is this total disconnect is actually the most connected even after he leaves. But we'll get back to that point. So like I said, it seems that the Bnei HaNebi'im and even Eliyahu himself see a new era emerging. Eliyahu thinks, I'm finished. What I stood for is over. Somebody else is taking over. I'm going to leave. I want to be by myself. I want to be with Borei Olam, just me and him. There's no place for other people. And good luck to all of you in your new way and your new approach. The Bnei HaNevi'im seem to understand it the same way. Strange way to say that he's going to die. And Elisha responds curiously. Keep quiet, keep quiet. Why is it secret? Everybody knows. Before I move on, I want to just digress for a moment and then I'll get back. This chapter, Perek Aleph, has similarities to a different chapter. Can anyone pick that chapter out? Let me just think. So there's a few meetings. He meets once with Bnei Nevi'im. How many do we think? If we assume, and it could be a fair assumption, that they're the same group. Right? So how many Bnei Nevi'im are there? 50. So he meets 50 people once. He meets 50 people twice. And then then he meets 50 people a third time. Right? And there is this episode with fire. So does anyone remember a chapter that this sounds like? One panic ago, right? In other words, the Sirei HaMishim get burnt, then they don't get burnt. Right? So, in a sense, you have groups of Hamishim, you have fire in the beginning and then no fire at the end. That's almost reversed. No fire and then fire here in the Se'ara. You also, in both times, Eliyahu seeks solitude. And in both times, he's deprived of that solitude. He wants to stay on that, right? He wants to stay away from the people on the mountain. And what does the Malach say? You got to get down. You have a mission to go. And in both times, he's going to talk and he's left alone with one person. But how different is the story? One time he's telling the king that he's going to die. And one other time he's going to tell his apprentice Navi that he's going to live. They both reflect back to his replacement Nivu'ah, because in one sense he's beginning the demise of the whole house of Ahav, right? Through this prophecy. And with Elisha, we'll finish that demise. It seems to be that Eliyahu Navi seeks absolute solitude and not getting it. With Ahaziah, with the story of Ahaziah and his death, right? It ends with his harshness. His final act is the way he lived, prophesizing the death of the king. But with Elisha, things are a little different. It seems to be that towards the end of his life, his last act of his life, he has made peace, maybe for the first time in his entire life, with not being alone, with that lack of solitude. And there seems to be some flicker of change in Eliyahu towards his, and it comes through with this final relationship with Elisha. Now, let's go back. Why does Eliyahu try to get rid of Elisha? So I said, I think it's because he sees that difference in approaches between himself and Elisha. And we saw that back in Perek Yutet, as I mentioned, I did it. And therefore, what he's doing is sort of resigning himself that this is what God wants. I'm going alone. He will replace me. My mission is done, left incomplete, and a new approach will totally be taken apart. And there'll be no vestige left of me. And therefore, there's no point to bring Elisha along. He's a different guy. Good luck. I've given you, I've taught you, you'll take your approach, mine is over. But and I think the major player in this chapter is not Eliyahu. The major player in this chapter is Elisha. Elisha, however, takes a bit of a different approach. And the entire structure of this chapter is to create Elisha as the new Navi. And if we see it in that light, we'll start rereading some of these psukim in a different light. Elisha refuses, by swear, to leave Eliyahu. And I think that's going to be very important. He will never leave him. And he keeps refusing to leave him. And now, Eliyahu keeps telling him, again, Shevna. And he says, no, I'm not going to leave you. They go to Yericho. And again in Yericho, the same story. And then, Shevna po ki Adonai shelachani yadena. Hay Hashem haynav shchem yezch vayelchu shinehim. That's different. In the first time, vayerdu bet el. Second time, vayavo Yericho. Vayelchu shinehim. They go together. This time, the Bnei Nevi'im don't tell Elisha, he's lokeh adonecha me'al roshecha. And all of a sudden, Eliyahu makes peace with Elisha going with him. Breaks, they go in the Haravah, and he says, what do you want? Elisha refuses to submit to Eliyahu's plan. Elisha is insisting, Eliyahu, I might be different than you, but I will be an heir. I will be a spiritual heir to your approach. Now, how could that happen? Well, already, vayelchu shenehem, one word's missing, almost yahdav. Where do we see that? Of course, with Abraham and Yitzhak. Two people could be no more different. But Yitzhak is really a spiritual heir to Abraham to pass it on to Yaakov. In other words, the hinting here is that there is a way that Elisha can be an absolute spiritual heir to Eliyahu, even though he's very different. And Eliyahu seems to somehow make peace with that. And that leads us, how does that happen? So that leads us up to Pasuk Tet. In Pasuk Tet, this is the big one. ויהי כאוברם ואליהו אמר אלישע שאל מה אעשה לך בטרם אלקח מעמך ויאמר אלישע והנה פי שיניים ברוחך אליי. What do you want me to do for you? And he says, I want double of your ruach. פי שיניים ברוחך אליי. Well, what does that mean? What is this פי שיניים ברוחך אליי? So, we have a text with Mefarshim. And a Mikraot Gedolah. If not, I'll just read it outside. Oh, you don't have to. He's going upstairs. So if you take a look at the Mitzudot has a typical perush, which if I would ask you, what's Pishinayim Benu Hayalai? Somebody just throw me out. What do you think? Simplest. What? Double what? Double your what? Your Ruach HaKodesh, your spirituality, your Nebuah. Double it. I want double the power. I want double the connection. Thank you. As I said before, that's a straight, and a lot of the Mefarshim seem to understand it that way, but that is a strange request. The Zohar itself asks, how's that possible? How do you ask somebody for something that he doesn't have? By definition, he doesn't have double of what he has, because he only has what he has. So what kind of question is that? But Banel's question is, and how do you ask Eliyahu to give you Ruach HaKodesh? That's up to one person. Whatever that. Only God can give Ruach HaKodesh. So, but that I would say would be the simplest way. Pishinayim. So says the Mitzudot, שתשרה עלי רוח הנבואה במעלה כפולה על מה ששרתה עליך. Okay. Another approach, right, which is brought in the Radak in the name of Hazal. Pershu Razal kiflayim mima shehaya beEliyahu v'hu shehaya shnei metim echad b'haya v'echad b'moto. In other words, double the miracles. You did Tehayat Metim once, I want to do it twice. Right? And Hazal have this statement throughout. Okay, again, it's interesting. But again, a bizarre request for Elisha to ask for Eliyahu. When Eliyahu says, what do you want me to do for you? And it's clearly that's not something that Eliyahu was expecting. He says, well, you asked me something difficult. Ralbag has an interesting approach. He says, והנה פשניים ברוחך אליי, רצונו לומר, במה שהאצלת מרוחה על כל בני הנביאים, יהיה הנאצל לי מרוחה פשניים על כל אחד מהם. No, I want double what you have. I want, you have bnei nevi'im, they each got a certain amount, I want a double portion. Right? So pishnayim means double what they got. So if there's 50 of them, right, and I'm the 51st, split it into 52 parts and give me 2. Sounds like Bechor. What a Bechor. Right, Beruchacha, it says, Ma shehetzalta meruchacha al kol bnei hanevi'im. Zed al-bag. Whatever you set on from your ruach onto all the bnei hanevi'im, יהיה נאצל לי מרוחך פשניים על כל אחד מהם. I want double of each one of them. והוא מעניין מה שאמר כי את הבכור בן השנואה יקטיר לתת לו פשניים בכל אשר ימסה לו. So it's a בכורה. Interesting. פשניים. Okay. And I'll final with one final, not one, I have 2 more, but I'm going to leave one for the end. But I want to do what Radak mentions, another Perush, in the name of his father. And he says, so he continues with this Hazal, with the miracles, and he says, V'adoni avi yarosh al Peresh, Pishnayim, Shinei halakim, Sha'al, Shiyeh lo meruach Eliyahu, V'chen הוא אומר, Pishnayim b'chol asher yimatzeh lo, שני חלקי נכסיו, כי הבכור נוטל שני חלקים מנכסים, והפשוט נוטל חלק השלישי. Goes back to Bechor, sounds almost exactly like the Ralbag. I want 2/3, and right, if you have 2, I get 2/3, and the Pashut gets 1/3. But he's not learning the word Pishnayim as double. The source of the Radak is Ibn Jannah and others who say Pishinayim here means what? It means 2/3. Okay, and that's where he's getting this two. That's where he's coming up. Now, where does that mean? How could he say that? So they bring a proof text. And the Radak doesn't bring it, but others bring it. And I'm going to read to you in Zechariah. והיה בכל הארץ, זכריה י"ג ח' והיה בכל הארץ נאום השם, פי שעיניים בה יכרתו יגבעו, והשלישית יוותר בה. So פי שעיניים there means what? 2 portions, 2/3. Right? 2/3. Right? Professor Samed brings an interesting linguistic aspect of this, that the P here could mean be connected to the Pim, which is a helik, like almost as if it would say Pim Shinaim, but that's another approach. But nevertheless, what it seems to be, what the Radak seems to say here is that the word Pi Shinaim doesn't mean at all double. Adrabah, it means a 2/3 portion. Again, the Radak refers back to the Bechorah, so it's similar to Ralbag, but the Pishinayim, it means different. With Ralbag, it means I want double of the other guy. Here it means I want Pishinayim, meaning the double portion, so to speak, the 2/3 portion. Right? Assuming that I get 2/3 of what you have. And then the rest get 1/3. Right? I want to get 2/3, and the Pashut gets 1/3. Nevertheless, it seems to be we're going back here to some portion of Bechorah, where Elisha is not asking everything that Eliyahu has, but a good portion of it, but he's comparing himself to a child of Bechor. Now that's going to be a very important. If you get a chance, take a look at the Ibn Ezra on Bechorah, because he references this piece at the end. Refers Ibn Ezra in Devarim Kaf Aleph Yud Zayin references back to Elisha. The Pishnayim here. So it's an interesting connection. So we're connecting Elisha's request to the request of a firstborn child. Now let's take a look at that for a minute before we move on. If you have a firstborn child, everybody else still asks this question, and all of us. It's not up to Eliyahu. What are you talking about? Why is he asking this from Eliyahu? Eliyahu says, what can I do for you? And by the way, Eliyahu is probably shocked at the request. He's clearly shocked. Because he says, Hiksheta lishol. What do you mean, Hiksheta lishol? It's not up to me. And I'll give you a sign. If you see me go, you'll get it. But that's fine. That sign and how that works, we'll get to it in a minute. But in a sense, Abba Manel's question is powerful. I think we might be able to say that it's not up to Eli. It's not up to Eliyahu. But if we make the comparison to the Bechor, we already know. Similarly, it's not up to the father to choose who to give that double portion to. He has to give it. It's an automatic. The Bechorah is automatic. So why is Elisha even asking it? In a sense, why would he ask it? He's asking the way a son would ask the Bechorah from his father. Meaning, I know I'm getting it. I know I'm entitled to it. And I know you have to give it to me. And it's not up to you. But I want your affirmation. Eliyahu, I am Elisha. I know I wasn't your choice as a successor. I know God told you that I have to succeed you. Like a Bechor succeeds his father. But I want your affirmation. I want your affirmation that I will succeed you. There's an interesting Malbim. The Malbim says, you know what the Pishinayim is? This is totally different. The Malbim says Pishinayim, it means double. You know what the double is? Your derech and mine. I'm going to get double. I'm going to have my approach, my mahalach, but I'll also get yours. So double, because I'm you, and I'm also me. I don't know if that's Peshat, but it has a key component here to understand what Elisha is trying to accomplish. Elisha is trying to be his own person with his own approach, but a legitimate heir and continuum to Eliyahu, a continuation of the Tanach of Eliyahu, while still maintaining his own approach. Something that everyone until now understood is impossible. Eliyahu answers, if you see me go up, you'll get it. What is he saying? What do you mean if you see? Well, if you see me go up, and we're talking about a nebu'ah, right? If we just put on our Rambam caps for a minute, what is that going to mean? Meaning if you can internalize the message of this nebu'ah, then you'll be able to accomplish that. If you want that double portion, if you want to be me and you, if you want to be your own person and still continue my derech, you have to understand and decode the message of this nebu'ah. What is that message? Eliyahu is going up b'se'ara. He is not dying, he is going up b'rechev. Right? Shel esh. Well, what does that mean? It means that Eliyahu's job is not complete. It means that Eliyahu will have to, quote-unquote, come back. It means that he didn't die because he hasn't completed his job. So in a sense, his lack of dying, in a sense, also means that something has been left incomplete in his life. And something needs to be perfected. So Eliyahu is saying, if you can see that, if you can see that there's something that I've left undone, and that there's certain things that need to be perfected in my approach, and you could fully internalize that point, you'll be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Right? Just focus on that for a minute, he tells him, and you will understand it. הקשית לשאול, אם תראה אותי לוקח מאיתך, יהיה לך כן. ואם אין, if you miss that point, if you don't understand it, then you're not going to get it. You're not going to be successful. You could still be the next chief Nevi of the country. But that goal, it's all in the way I leave you. It's all in the fact that I'm leaving something up. Eliyahu goes up, and in the next pasuk, "Vayhem hacholchim haloch v'daber v'hinei rechev esh b'susei esh vayafridu ben shnehem." The rechev esh, susei esh, are mafrid between them. The esh is mafrid. That is a difference between Eliyahu and Elisha. There is that difference. Vayal Eliyahu b'se'ara shamayim ve'Elisha ro'eh v'hu mitza'ek avi avi rechev yisrael u'perashav ve'lo ra'ahu ot. The last thing he says is Avi Avi Rechev Yisrael Parashav. So let's take a look at that with those few words for a minute. Avi Avi. Well, we shouldn't be surprised that that's what he's saying now, because he viewed himself as what? Ben Bechor. Right? So if we compare back to the Ben Bechor, the words Avi Avi make sense for him to say. Avi Avi. Right? Bnei Nevi'im never called him Avi. They called him Adoncha. Right? But they would never say Avi, because they don't have that intimacy, they don't have that connection, they don't consider themselves a continuation of Eliyahu. It's Eliyahu's difficult guy to continue. But I think the secret goes in the next few words. Rechev Yisrael Parashav. What is a Rechev Yisrael? So some of the Mefarshim say something interesting. Right? With this Rechev Yisrael Parashav, they turn this and they say that they compare it to a rechev mamash, that's a military protection, so to speak. And that's interesting, because the rechev Yisrael Parashav, detav Targum Yonatan, detav lehon Yisrael beslote mirtichin uparashin. His prayers save them more than Rechev and Parashit. And this Targum Yonatan is brought by the classic Mefarshim, and that Al-Bag brings, Mizaheh Tarech, he says, Rechev Yisrael Perashav, Ki'ilu Yomar Shu Atokef Ve'Hozek Shel Yisrael B'Milchama. He is the strength in battle. And others say, L'hagid Shu Hayah Ha'omed Al Bnei Amo Metzilam Me'oivim, Yoter Merechev U'Parashim, Abad Banem. So this is an interesting thing. Eliyahu is the protection of Am Yisrael more than the fighters in battle. He was the one. He is Rechev, and he's the Rechev Yisrael Perashav. Well, that's strange, because nowhere, not even once, do we find Eliyahu at all involved, unlike other Nevi'im, at all involved in any battle whatsoever on behalf of Am Yisrael. Probably one of the few Nevi'im that don't. He's called Rechev Yisrael Perashav by Elisha. That doesn't make any sense. By the way, Elisha, Hafuch, we do find him in military involvement till the day he dies. His last act is involved in the prediction of military victories. Not Eliyahu. Why is he calling him Rechev Yisrael U'Perashav? Now, there's one verse here that we'll refer to that you didn't get to yet, which is in Perek Vav, but this is important. In Perek Vav, Pasuk Yud Dalid, you'll find Elisha in a precarious situation. Right? Elisha, there's a whole gedud of Aram that's sent to capture Elisha. וישלח שם הסוסים וריח וחיל כבד ויבואו עליו ויקיפו על העיר. וישכם משרת האיש אלוהים לצאת והנה חיל סובב את העיר. ויאמר נערו אדוני איך נעשה וגדו. אל תירא כי רבים אשר איתנו מאשר אותם. We have more. ויתפלל אלישע ויאמר פקח נא את עיניו. Elisha already saw it. ויראה ויפקח השם את עיני הנער ביד והנה ההר מלא סוסים ורכב אש סביבות אלישע. Elisha knows how to bring down this Rechev Esh that he saw beforehand, right? Back and forth. And he uses it to protect himself and the city. He uses the Rechev Esh for military protection. Elisha spends his life openly protecting Am Yisrael militarily through miracles. But Eliyahu didn't. So why is Elisha calling him Rechev Yisrael U'Perashav? And it seems that Elisha was saying that you all misunderstood Eliyahu. He was mysterious. He was b'mashal. But I will live the life as his nimshal. While you thought he was just driving you all crazy, while you thought all he was doing was making your life miserable and rebuking, he really was, by his very essence, the true protector of Am Yisrael. He really stood for you. You just didn't see it because he was the mysterious Nevi. What I will be is the nimshal to his life. What I will be is the nimshal to the Rechev Yisrael. He really is the Rechev Yisrael. He really did protect you. You didn't get it? Watch me live it out differently. I will be the peshat of his sod. I will explain to you what he was through my life. He is the Rechev Yisrael hidden. I'm the open Rechev Yisrael. With me, I tell the Misharet, Pikah na tenav. God, open his eyes. Let him see the Rechev surrounding the city. Let him see that we have more with them. Eliyahu never opened anyone's eyes. Eliyahu stayed mysterious. Eliyahu stayed alone. Eliyahu stayed by himself. Until he was forced to have it with Elisha at the end of his life. Until he was forced to unite with him. Until he was literally, Elisha refused to leave him as Eliyahu. I got you. I'm the only one in the world who understands you. I'm going to translate you to the world. I'll be different. I'll run my way differently because I'm not you. But I will interpret you to everyone. You left the world misunderstood. I'm going to be Pishinayim, the Mashal and the Nimshal. I am going to explain you to the world. They will, through me, finally understand what the Rechev means. That you served as the true protector to Am Yisrael. Eliyahu leaves. He leaves him. And Elisha responds in a few interesting ways. Of course, he rips his clothes. He mourns him. And it's very clear that the mourning is true pain. In other words, he will never see him again. And the pasuk is very clear. It's final. He doesn't. V'lo ra'ahu od. V'yhazek b'bgadav v'yikarem l'shnayim. Then he does something else. He then takes the aderet, continues, and performs the miracle on the way back through the Yarden that Eliyahu just did on the way there. Almost doesn't seem an act of mourning, almost an act of bravado, so to speak. I'm the guy now. In a sense, what we said before, using his first miracle, he uses the aderet of Eliyahu. Now, within the few minutes I'll spend quickly the rest. What happens? He comes back and he has 4 incidents that are really 2 incidents. 2 with the Bnei Nebi'im. Right? And he crosses the Yarden, performs that miracle. Vayiru Bnei Adim Yasher B'Yericho, Mineged Vayomru Naha Ruach Eliyahu Elisha. By the way, it's Bnei Haniva Yasher B'Yericho, Mashma, that it was the same. The ones in the Yarden are the same one in Yericho, so it can indicate that it was the same 50 throughout the whole time. And he says, okay, Ruach Eliyahu is now on Elisha, Vayavo Likrato V'Yishtach Lo Arsa. He's the new guy. Ruach Eliyahu is now on Elisha. He's now the new person. And what do they say? What do they want to do? Oh, let's go look for his body. So what did they miss? They missed the whole se'ara. They missed the whole thing that he's going up, meaning they missed the point that Eliyahu, what I said before, what Elisha had to get. The only way Elisha can be the true heir to Eliyahu is by seeing that nibu'ah, by seeing the body go up or not die and come back down. The Bnei Nevi'im didn't see that. They assume what? Oh, his body fell somewhere. I mean, they assume, at this point, like they said in the beginning, Eliyahu's done, and we now have a new guy, that's Elisha. The Ruach of Eliyahu is now on Elisha. And Elisha tells them, don't look, because he's nowhere. He's sort of not dead, in a certain sense. He went up to Shammai, meaning there still is a continuation to him. They refuse to believe that because they can't understand it. Obviously they can't understand it because they didn't see and understand and internalize the Nivuah of the Se'ara. So there's no way they can understand it. So they keep insisting, and Elisha keeps insisting, and then finally Elisha goes, you know what? There's no way they can get it. Go look for yourselves. When they look and don't find, hopefully they'll figure out what? That he just went up, and they'll start figuring out what Elisha has known through Nibuah. So incident, that's the incident of Eliyahu with the Bnei HaNebi'im, Elisha with the Bnei HaNebi'im, sort of translating that there is a continuation to Eliyahu in him. Then there's 2 other funny incidents, which we wonder what they're doing here. Would they belong in this perek? We'd assume, right, that really they represent a new story, right? We'd assume that this ends, okay, they couldn't find him, I told you, and the idea should end in Perek Yud Het, right? And Perek Yud Het should be the beginning of a new story, and maybe it is, because it seems to be totally unrelated to the death incident, and we'd assume now, these are now Nevu'ot that Elisha performs, right? The fact that they're in the same Perek, that doesn't mean anything. We know that maybe the person who breaks the Perakim didn't always understand the stories, and therefore the break of the Perakim is not always the most important break. But here I would assert it is. Why? Because you have to connect Yud Tet to Yud Het, Vayomru Anshe Ha'ir. So you can't begin a new story with Anshe Ha'ir because it has to refer back to the city that he was in already. So therefore, it seems to be, by the very nature, a continuation of the previous city. Vayamru Anshe Ha'ir means what? The people of the city of Yericho. Yeah? So Anshe Ha'ir Elisha, Hinena Mushav Ha'ir Tov, V'hamayim Ra'im. Could you cure the water? Meaning, make the bad water better. And he does that. Kuli Tzlahit Hadasha, a new Tzlahit, V'simu Shamel V'yikro Elav. And he uses melach and he cures the water. He's merapeh the mayim. Now, that could be a mashal for a whole lot of things. Right? The mayim are the representative of Torah, the representative of the Word of God. They're harsh. Elisha is to sweeten them after Eliyahu's departure. He does do that. It is no doubt also a literal miracle, but it would indicate maybe some new approach. But what's interesting, he uses melach. Just like he used Adir Eliyahu, he uses melach, he uses something harsh to make it sweet. So he's again, that same dichotomy, using the melach to sweeten water. Right? Right? Like using a merge of the approach of Eliyahu with a new approach. So he sweetens the water. And yes, it is a new approach. The water is different now. The water is sweetened. It's clean. He was merapeh the mayim. There's work to do. Then we have this funny incident. Vayal misham betel. Again, the fact that it's misham, this must be connected. It's not a new story. And here he meets these ne'arim ktanim yatsu min ha'ir, and they scream at him, and he doesn't like to be insulted. So you don't insult Elisha and get away with it. If anyone thought that Elisha is this easygoing guy, read this one. He's not so much easier than Eliyahu, but he just doesn't. He gets these. He brings out these bears, and they go and they attack him. And Hazal point out, the Gemara says, guess what? It was a double miracle that he did here. He went out and did a double miracle. Double miracle, yeah. There was, either you could say there was a forest and he just invented the dubim, or there was no forest, there was no dubim, lo dubim velo yad, as the famous statement comes from that Gemara, and there was nothing, and he created it all in order to perform this miracle. And that's what the Gemara says. It says, massive miracle to kill these two people, to kill these Ne'arim. What's going on? So, allow me to really take this one step further. And I have no proof of this, but it just may fit. These Ne'arim, right, so the first two stories were Bnei HaNevi'im. The next two stories are average, common people. Anshe Yericho explaining them, we need a new derech, so to speak. And he's merapeh mayim. Performs a miracle. Now these Ne'arim, they resent that. Who do you think you are? Do you think you can now change you're coming to eradicate Eliyahu and Navi? These probably were Kanaim, right? They were, who do you think you are? Kanaim. Okay? You're destroying Eliyahu. And we know very much Elisha will have none of that. Elisha is the Talmid par excellence of Eliyahu. He will continue Eliyahu. Right? So this has to be eradicated. Those people who think they understood Eliyahu. Right? Those people who think that they are Mamshich Darko Shel Eliyahu. They think their Mamshich is Derech. Right? The rabbi's gone, but we still are upholding his approach. Elisha says, no. We're going to, that is I am this kin'ah, this kana'ut, these na'arim, kna'im, aleh kareah. No, that's because, again, that last point, I can't prove for sure, but it seems to fit. If what we're saying is correct, if this really is true, that Eliyahu is transferring his mission to Elisha, and that this chapter is not so much the demise of Eliyahu, But it is about Elisha taking over. And it is about a transformation in Eliyahu. It's about a happy ending to his life. It's about a man who thought his whole mission was lost. And a final talk where he softens to Elisha at the end of his life, and he says, you could do it. Maybe there's hope. It's not easy, but if you finally understand what's happening to me, you'll get it. If not, forget about it. But but it's possible. And there is, through the Aderet almost, this rapprochement between the two. We never see them together. They were probably together, but the Nevi never puts them together. Except this incident. Because here is where Eliyahu comes to grips and says, wow, so he really is going to finish my job. He really is going to perfect it. He's going to be the nimshal, like we said to my mashal. He's really going to teach what I stood for, maybe in a bit more understandable way that the people can understand it a little bit better. And so there is this essential connection between the two. And the people that Elisha meets do not understand. The Bnei Nevi'im don't fully understand it. Not before, not after. Maybe they do when he finally teaches them that that you can't find him. The Bnei Eliyahu don't understand it fully until he maybe teaches them. And certainly these Na'arim don't get it, and he doesn't bother teaching them. And as we'll see him move forward, he will be his own person, but he will at the end be a true student of Eliyahu.